In the hush before dawn, when Salem's icy streets still hold secrets older than the churches that guard them, there is a place where voices never die. They say if you stand behind St. Catherine's Academy for young ladies, just as the first light bleeds through the mist, you'll hear it too, 24 whispers layered on the wind. We are still here. Most dismiss it as superstition, a ghost story to keep children inside after dark. But you're not here for bedtime tales, are you? No. You're here because you sense that behind every polite lie of history, there's a darker truth, stitched in silence, buried in stone. And tonight, you'll hear what you were never meant to know. Before you, many have tried to pull back this veil, but few return unchanged. So, ask yourself, when you hear what really happened to the 24 orphan girls who never left St. Catherine's, will you dare to carry that truth with you? Take a breath. Look over your shoulder. This is not a tale for the faint-hearted. It begins in 1834, with an iron gate that only swung one way, inward, and a promise of salvation that tasted sweet on the tongue, but burned like poison in the blood. Tonight, you are not just a listener. You are a witness. And once you step through these doors with me, there is no turning back. Welcome to the secret they killed to keep. Welcome to St. Catherine's. The story begins not with a crime, but with a prayer, whispered by desperate mothers dying in cold tenements, their last breath a plea for their daughters to find sanctuary. St. Catherine's Academy opened its doors to these lost souls with a promise wrapped in silk, education, moral salvation, a future unmarred by poverty's grime. Behind the high brick walls, the girls were taught to curtsy, to read scripture, to sew neat hems and silence their questions. Order was the first commandment here. But under the daily rituals of prayers and lessons, something else pulsed, a quiet trade in innocence, brokered by three women whose black habits hid appetites older than any creed. Mother Superior Victoria Whitman, steel-spined, her Boston accent polished like the marble floor as she walked. Sister Margaret Collins, gentle voice, warm hands, eyes that could read every weakness etched into a child's face. And Sister Agnes Murphy, the keeper of accounts, the enforcer of rules. Together they crafted a sanctuary that the people of Salem revered, because people trust what they can't see if it comes clothed in piety. Each girl who crossed that threshold was catalogued, a name, an age, a whispered prayer over trembling knuckles. Some stayed weeks, some years. None were ever seen again after their 18th birthday. Official records say they found good Christian homes. But no letter ever came back. No young woman returned for a visit. And still, the iron gates stayed open. The flow of orphans never stopped. And every night, the basement lights flickered like watchful eyes under the Academy's skin. Picture this, a winter night in 1851. The snow presses against the old brick walls of St. Catherine's like a muffling hand. Elizabeth Hartwell, a teacher new to the Academy, walks the silent halls after evening prayers. She's heard the rumors, the locked third floor, the basement no one speaks of. But tonight, something calls her downward. Maybe it's the draft under the chapel door. Maybe it's the hollow knock when she taps her foot on the marble near the altar. Or maybe, in her bones, she already knows what she's about to find, and part of her wants to prove herself wrong. She descends alone, oil lamp flickering. The basement should be empty, a dusty storeroom for linens, tools, broken furniture. But the air grows colder the deeper she goes. A smell curls around her, iron and damp stone, something she can't quite name but every cell in her body recognizes as wrong. Behind a row of rotting crates, her hand brushes against an uneven wall. She leans close, lantern raised. There, under peeling plaster, a seam, a false partition. She finds a crowbar and pries it open, her breath thunder in her chest. And then she sees it, 24 narrow beds bolted to the floor, iron shackles still hanging from the headboards like metal vines waiting to coil. By each bed, a relic, a doll's head, a faded ribbon, a chipped rosary. And above it all, scrawled in childish desperation, "We are still here." Most people would have run screaming from that basement, but Elizabeth Hartwell did not. She was not like most. She traced her fingers across the iron restraints, cold as the grave. She picked up a torn cloth doll, its button eyes staring back with mute accusation. How many nights had this room heard whispers, prayers, sobs muffled in blankets so no one above would hear? How many girls lay awake, chained to a bed, wondering if the morning would bring freedom or something worse? Elizabeth read the words on the wall again, "We are still here." The handwriting was frantic, looping, written by a child whose hope had turned to terror. The Academy's records showed these girls were adopted into Christian homes, married off to good families. That's what the donors were told. That's what the pastors blessed from their pulpits. But this hidden room told another story, one too real to dismiss as rumor. She gathered scraps of evidence, hair ribbons, a rosary missing half its beads, a tiny wooden cross carved with the initials M.O., Mary O'Brien. She stuffed them into her cloak, heart pounding with every step. Above her head, floorboards creaked. Elizabeth snuffed her lamp, pressing herself into the shadows as footsteps echoed down the basement stairs. A lantern's glow spilled across the floor. 3 silhouettes entered, Mother Superior Victoria Whitman, Sister Agnes, and Sister Margaret. Voices drifted to her, calm, cold, unmistakably inhuman in their certainty. Elizabeth held her breath, praying she wouldn't be found. She had seen what was never meant to be seen. And now, they would do anything to silence her. When Elizabeth escaped that night, she didn't run to the church. She didn't run to the mayor. She knew better. She fled to the only place left, the town's oldest graveyard, where the records of Salem's sins were buried in stone and frost. There, by lantern light and trembling hands, she sealed her testimony inside a mason jar. She buried it beneath the roots of an ancient elm, hoping the truth would outlive the liars who owned this town. But power protects itself. By dawn, word spread that Elizabeth Hartwell had vanished, gone mad from hysteria, they said. The Academy's benefactors whispered that she'd been caught stealing. Some claimed she'd fled to Canada. Others hinted she drowned herself in the cold Atlantic. Not one word in the Salem Gazette mentioned the basement. Not one good Christian soul asked about the children whose names vanished from parish rolls like footprints swallowed by snow. And so St. Catherine's Academy prospered. More girls arrived. More donations poured in. More secrets slipped under the floorboards with the same quiet efficiency that built entire empires on the backs of the innocent. Tonight, I'm telling you what they never wanted you to hear, because every stone wall eventually cracks. Every lie rots from within. And every man who dares to listen becomes something the old guard fears most, awake. If you're ready to see how deep this hole goes, keep listening. But know this, once you hear it, you can never go back. Some nights, when the wind cuts through Salem's crooked alleys like a blade, old men swear they still hear faint cries drifting from where St. Catherine's Academy once stood. They say the ground remembers, that no brick and mortar can silence the suffering that seeps into the soil. The Academy burned in 1904 under mysterious circumstances, the official story says. A lightning strike, an accident. Convenient, isn't it? But ashes don't lie the way men do. When the ruins cooled, firemen found iron restraints warped by the flames, restraints that matched the design described in Elizabeth Hartwell's hidden testimony, unearthed 80 years later by accident. They found scraps of tattered cloth, doll limbs half-burned, names carved into the underside of floorboards, Mary O'Brien, Sarah Thompson, Catherine Murphy. Names the Academy's ledgers claimed had been adopted by good Christian families who never existed outside forged letters and invented addresses. When the truth surfaced in '87, the city council buried it again, this time under layers of legalese, sealed archives, hush money to surviving families who'd long given up asking questions. It was safer to let the past rot in darkness than to face what it revealed about the people who built this place. About the churches that blessed it. About the men who profited. Do you feel it now, that cold weight in your chest? Good. Hold it close. Because the deeper we go, the more you'll understand, these stories aren't just history. They're blueprints for control. Look closer and you'll see it, the same blueprint repeating itself, century after century, in every so-called sanctuary built to save the unwanted. St. Catherine's was never about salvation. It was an assembly line for broken flesh. A system hidden behind stained glass and the Word of God. And the true brilliance, the sinister genius, was how they made the townspeople complicit. Ask yourself, who donated food? Who stitched uniforms for the girls? Who preached sermons praising Mother Superior's charity from pulpits that thundered hellfire for lesser sins? The same men who buried questions when adoption letters stopped. The same women who hushed each other's suspicions for fear of scandal. Good, God-fearing people, so desperate to look righteous they would not look twice at the locked doors and the missing girls. Does it sound so far removed from now? Or does it echo in the corners of your own life, the way polite society looks away when the institutions grow fat on silence? If they could bind children in iron then, why would they hesitate to bind your mind in invisible shackles now? You think the chains are gone because you can't see them. But control has evolved. It doesn't need iron. It needs your belief that you are free, while you remain exactly where they want you, docile, distracted, grateful for your cage. If you're still with me, prove it. Comment, "No more cages," below. Twice. Let them see you. Let them feel you waking up. When Elizabeth Hartwell found the hidden room in 1851, she shattered the lie, but only for a heartbeat. Imagine her lantern flickering across cold stone, catching on the rusted shackles, the splintered headboards, the scraps of childhood left behind like offerings in a tomb. 24 little beds. 24 iron confessions. And a single phrase scratched into plaster by desperate, shaking hands, "We are still here." She ran to the authorities believing, foolishly, that daylight would end the darkness. But the darkness had lawyers, priests, judges, men whose daughters wore the same gray uniforms and sat in the same pews, men whose fortunes depended on keeping secrets sealed behind brick and prayer. Elizabeth's report was buried beneath layers of official silence, her testimony dismissed as hysteria, a woman's nerves, a teacher's delusion. The false wall was rebuilt. The academy stayed open for decades more, feeding the machine that devoured the poor and inconvenient. And when they finally boarded it up, they made sure the town forgot. Generations passed. Names faded from records. But secrets never die, they wait in the walls, behind altars, inside the polite stories we tell about who we are. The 24 girls never left St. Catherine's. Because the system that consumed them never left you. Their chains turned to paper. Their dormitory turned into your schools, your offices, your quiet compliance. You feel it, don't you? That cold echo, "We are still here." But you were never meant to read that message, never meant to stand in the basement of your own illusions and see the rust for what it is. You were taught to trust the walls, the locks, the gentle smile of the caretaker who tells you it's all for your own good. You were taught to ignore the scratching in the dark, to dismiss the soft weeping that echoes through your bloodline. But once you hear it, truly hear it, you can't unhear it. The truth is not a ghost story, it's a blueprint. The same system that bound those girls to cold iron binds you with invisible chains, policies, paychecks, screens glowing through the night like stained glass for the modern congregation. Your obedience is purchased cheap, a wage, a weekend, a promise of safety. But look deeper, the academy didn't just vanish. It evolved. The men who buried Elizabeth's words built schools that shape thought, pulpits that mold shame, laws that trade your freedom for protection. And every generation, they polish the shackles, repaint the beds, and tell you you're safe as long as you behave. Tonight, you stand where Elizabeth did, lantern in hand, staring at the beds of the forgotten. But you are not her. You are more. You do not beg permission to speak. You do not ask the wardens for truth. You become the warden of your own mind. Write this below twice if you're ready to burn the false walls down, I hear the chains break. Twice. To mark yourself as awake. Twice. To pull another brick from the lie. Once you write it, I hear the chains break, twice like an oath, you sever yourself from the lineage of the obedient. You're no longer just a man listening to shadows, you become the shadow that hunts the keepers. The world you were handed was designed to keep you docile. To keep you kneeling in classrooms built by the same architects who locked away inconvenient children. When you realize the lesson, that your history is not a polished statue but a rotting skeleton hidden behind church walls, you understand why they fear the man who questions. They fear the one who peers into the basement, who counts the beds, who asks, where did they go? You were taught to recite dates and names but never to ask why the dates repeat, why the names change but the system remains. Institutions rebrand themselves. They change habits, titles, uniforms, but the chain stays the same. Orphan girls traded for orphan thoughts. Shackles of iron traded for shackles of screens and slogans. So now ask yourself, whose bed are you strapped to? What shackles did they tell you were gifts? Whose voice is in your head whispering be good, be small, be quiet? If you can name it, you can break it. If you can see it, you can torch it. That's why they bury the records. That's why they fear a man with a lantern in the dark. Keep it lit. We go deeper. So you wonder, what happened to the 24? Did they rot in that stone basement? Did they cry for mothers who never came? Or did they become something worse, proof that innocence is currency for power? The nuns of St. Catherine's were not holy women. They were merchants of flesh disguised in piety. Their true cathedral was silence. Their ritual was the transaction, innocence in, obedience out. Or worse, no one out at all. There are still documents hidden in state archives, yellowed ledgers that record donations from gentlemen whose names later funded churches, railroads, libraries. Look at those grand marble halls and remember. The stones were bought with secrets. Look at their portraits, their oil paintings with soft hands resting on books, see the missing children in the shadows behind them. That's your real history. Not the story on your school's bronze plaque. You feel it, don't you? That chill when you stand alone in an empty hallway at night, that echo under your feet is not just the wind. It's the hush of all the voices buried alive so your world could look clean. But if you stand too long in the dark, the truth will come for you too, it always does. So hold your lantern higher. Don't flinch when the shadows move. We're not finished yet. You wanted forbidden knowledge. Now you wear it like iron on your skin. Let's open the next door. The academy was finally shuttered in 1852, officially for financial insolvency. The newspapers praised Mother Superior Whitman for her years of saintly service as she quietly disappeared into a convent in Quebec, or so the records say. But those who handled the building's sale found sealed rooms behind brick walls, rows of small iron beds, rusted shackles, scraps of cloth and hair that no storm could wash clean. The 24 girls were never found. Not a single grave, not a single headstone. Only a list of names in Sister Agnes's spidery handwriting, first names only, no last names, no family to claim them. And yet, there are whispers that some survived, smuggled out the back door when the heat grew too strong. A few old men in Salem still tell stories of a woman seen on foggy streets, a woman with a scar behind her ear who would hiss secrets at drunks before vanishing down alleys that shouldn't exist. It's easy to dismiss them as ghosts. Easier than facing what the living did. Easier than wondering how many more buildings and how many more towns hide basement doors that should never be opened. I told you from the beginning, you're not supposed to know this. But you're still here. And if you're still here, write it below to seal the pact, we are still here. Write it twice. Once for the lost. Once for you, so you don't forget which side of the door you stand on. Years passed, but the truth never stayed buried for long. The land where St. Catherine's once loomed was sold, piece by piece, until nothing remained but the foundations and stories traded in whispers. Yet, the deeper you dig into New England's archives, hidden letters, missing parish records, inexplicable gaps in city ledgers, the more you see a pattern repeating itself like a stain that won't wash out. It wasn't just St. Catherine's. It wasn't just Salem. Hartford. Providence. Lowell. Places where orphan asylums rose overnight, funded by faceless benefactors with too much interest in obedience and silence. The same architecture. The same false promises. The same missing girls, or boys, if that was the market's hunger at the time. And when one place closed its doors, another opened, always with the blessing of churches, judges, men who smiled over brandy while signing papers that condemned the unwanted to darkness. You think your schools, your shelters, your institutions today are so different? Look closer. Read the fine print of every safe place the powerful praise. Who funds them? Who benefits when the broken vanish behind stone walls? Who signs the checks that buy the silence? They say history is a circle. But circles can be broken by a single sharp edge. You hearing this now, you are that edge. Remember what you wrote, we are still here. And the ones who hid the truth fear nothing more than a man who refuses to forget. Imagine for a moment that every brick laid in the name of salvation was just a mask for something hungrier than God, the hunger for control. Not the honest rule of law, but the secret governance of fear. Orphans were easy prey. Poor. Unseen. Their silence bought with prayers and iron shackles. But the trick, the oldest trick, is that the system never stopped at orphans. The same method bled into schools. Into asylums. Into churches where confessions are currency, secrets traded like gold. Into governments that learned long ago that the best prison is one a man doesn't know he's in. Control the mind, and you don't need chains on the wrists. Control belief, and you don't need guards at the door. They took children because children are clay, soft, pliable. But once they mastered children, they turned to you. Your mind. Your loyalty. Your dreams of order, obedience, moral safety. So they keep you distracted with shows of charity. They build monuments to their good works. They burn records when the truth leaks. And they call every whisper a conspiracy to keep you laughing at the thought that monsters wear holy robes and polished metals. Yet here you are, listening this far. You feel it, don't you? That itch behind your ribs that says, something has always been wrong. Hold on to it. Because only the ones who feel it, who trust that discomfort, ever step outside the circle. The rest just live and die inside it, blind to the locks on their own cages. Now you stand here, at the edge of knowing, and you can't unsee what's behind that door. The 24 orphan girls were not the end. They were a blueprint. An early draft of the same mechanism that binds your days, molds your thoughts, decides your worth. The hidden rooms, the sealed testimonies, the quiet burials, they never left St. Catherine's. They just spread like mold through every institution you trust. You were taught to see history as old bones in textbooks. But it breathes through your headlines, your schools, your votes. The same hands that chained children to iron beds now chain you to debts, screens, and narratives. They bury your hunger for freedom under fear of losing comfort. They feed you easy enemies so you never turn your eyes to the true architects, the ones who smile from pulpits and podiums and locked office doors. So what will you do now? You've heard the unspeakable. You've peered through the cracks they sealed with sermons and pledges. You know the taste of forbidden history. Say it aloud, twice in the comments below, I am not yours. Say it again, I am not yours. Carve it into the algorithm. Carve it into your spine. Remind the shadows that you do not belong to their machinery. Because secrets only rot in silence. And you who have stayed to the final word, are not silent anymore. The door is open. Walk through it.